When looking at the scope of video games and the video game industry, it is hard for anybody to argue that 2023 hasn't been a very strong year with some of the best titles we have seen in recent years. However, amongst the diamonds, there is a huge pile of shit sitting off to the side that unfortunately some of us were left to deal with. What is going on, YouTube universe? My name is Zirra, and today I will be counting down my top 10 worst video games of 2023. Now, obviously, this is a list that's going to be based on my own personal opinion and preferences, and it's going to be different, I'm sure, to many of the lists that you guys would set up at home. So all I ask is in the comments down below, let me know what you think the top 10 worst games are for yourself. Number 10, Overwatch 2. It pains me to put Overwatch 2 on this list because I am a huge fan of the Overwatch IP. I put a lot of man hours into the original Overwatch game, and transferring over to Overwatch 2, I was excited to get on board with the promises that were made of delivering a bigger and better title. Unfortunately, all those promises were broken. Steam's release of Overwatch 2 kicked off its exit from early access, and it went over terribly. Within hours, it had become one of Steam's worst reviewed games of all time, and players expressed their disappointment in both expensive skins and, as I just mentioned, the broken promises, including the removal of the PvE mode, which was Blizzard's reasoning of stepping away from Overwatch 1 and delivering Overwatch 2. A lack of big changes compared to the original game unfortunately leads this one to fall a little bit flat. And I've got a bit of a hot take here as well, feel free to agree or disagree, but the fact that all the new champions they had systematically released since Overwatch 2 came out being locked behind paywalls almost makes the game feel like a pay-to-win game, because those players who went on to pay for those characters would eventually play ranked mode with new, fresh, overpowered characters that haven't had the chance to be debuffed or anything yet, and it was almost guaranteeing them upgrading their ranks. And I feel with a game like this, that should definitely not be the case. Number 9, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3.
Use it against him, Kilo.
I intend to.
Unfortunately, the campaign for Modern Warfare 3 commits the biggest sin possible. It's fucking boring. What had the promise to be such an intriguingly spun web of mystery instead ends up being a dusty cobweb that you just get rid of with a broom and you don't give a second thought about. Yes, the gunplay still feels great and the graphics and sound design might be top tier, but it's hard to break away from the fact that this is still something that we have played many times before. If this is the quality we've come to expect from Call of Duty campaigns and Call of Duty games, maybe it's time for Call of Duty to step aside for a year or two, hit the reset button, and raise the low bar back to the standards that they once originally had. Number 8, Forspoken.
If you can bring them back, and that's a big if, I'll make you something with that aura of yours.
If I'm being completely honest, from the gameplay I have seen of Forspoken, it's far from the worst of 2023. At least once you get to the point where the game opens up and you get a feel for the range of abilities, which takes a lot longer to unlock than it should. The backlash, unfortunately, mostly comes from the story, the writing, and the characters within the game. Frey herself, the protagonist, received particular criticism for her flippant, snarky, MCU-esque style of dialogue, which a lot of people felt was mocking the genre and fell incredibly flat. This odd pairing broke the whole illusion for many players of the fantasy genre, which is surprising for a project that had some great video game writing legends behind it. Forspoken isn't the worst game of 2023, however it's definitely the most embarrassing, especially given the fact that Luminous, the game studio behind Forspoken, was folded back into its parent company Square Enix after the poor release of this game.
Isn't it? Are you planning on retrieving her smithing gear?
Might as well while we're here.
Number 7, Crime Boss Rockay City.
Don't you lose my candy gun, damn it.
Crime Boss Rockay City is an overly ambitious airball on all fronts that fails to hit the backboard at any point, from its sloppy moment-to-moment gameplay to its largely abysmal voice acting. There is an earnestness, however, to which Crime Boss has been put together that can be admired by players. as a kind of homage to the Payday franchise, or those who might love the feel of 90s and 80s backdrops. And the inescapability of the novelty in seeing de-aged Hollywood stars steering the story is one that could leave you licking your chops. However, the hokey charm on display is nowhere near strong enough to offset the repetitive and regularly frustrating mission design, the roguelike single player rapidly becoming a total chore, and the co-op juice isn't enough to be worth the squeeze, which is so unfortunate, because when you have so much star power in this game in the way of Chuck Norris, Danny Trejo, and many other Hollywood stars, you'd think this is a game that was set up for so much success, and unfortunately, it falls flat on its face.
Oh, yeah.
Number 6, Gry Hill Incident.
We need to get out of this cursed place. I hate this neighborhood hole.
As a horror fan, I was really stoked to get my hands on Gry Hill Incident, but unfortunately, after playing it, it feels like this is definitely a fitting name for such an awful horror game, because that's how I'm going to refer to the traumatic time I spent playing it. It almost feels like a conspiracy in its own right, given the way that it just so wholly mangles everything that it tries to pull off. And this is something that maybe the government should have done a better job of covering up. I can't get my head around the fact of whether this was supposed to be satirical and ironic, or whether it was supposed to be a scary, fearful horror game. But Gry Hill Incident fails in both scenarios, resulting in such a tedious but mercifully short jaunt through cornfields and backwater abodes that's about as fun as actually being probed by aliens. Actually, now that I think about it, I think I would have rathered the probe. Number 5, Redfall. When Redfall was first announced, this was something that had me absolutely chomping at the bit. Another Bethesda game, and Bethesda is one of my favourite gaming studios, and the concept behind playing with a team of friends taking out vampires was right up my alley. However, Redfall is a baffingly bad time across the board, whether playing solo or with a team. When you think of games like Arcane's Deathloop, Prey, and the acclaimed Dishonored series that come before this game, I think the bar might have been set a little bit too high, but even if it was a little bit lower, Redfall fell way short of that fucking bar. When talking about Redfall, there is one word that epitomizes it: basic. AI enemies that struggle to mount defenses or even effectively navigate the world. One-note mission design recycled and repurposed all the way through until the final encounter. Button commands break, characters disappear, and the cheap and static story scenes seem woefully unfinished by typical standards. There may be occasional glimpses in this game of competent co-op shooters on display, but otherwise, Redfall is just like a vampire in all the wrong ways. That is, it really wasn't ready for daylight in this state, and it sucks. Number 4, Skull Island: Rise of Kong. Skull Island: Rise of Kong is ugly and full of bugs, but the real problem is that at its core, it's fucking terrible. It is boring. It makes no meaningful attempts at all to do anything new or clever, with mindless combat and pointless platforming that make it feel like a worse version of every action game from the last 20 years. This isn't even the kind of bad game you can play to have a laugh at or to see whether they could have done something good but missed the point. It is just terrible from start to finish. There is no redemption for this game. Within a world where pop culture is currently at its height with Godzilla, Kong, and other Kaiju monsters, Rise of Kong could have been a game to tick some boxes at least enough to satisfy the needs of fans. However, this game doesn't even care enough about what it's doing to make the ape feel giant. Kong feels like a chimpanzee locked in a cage. Number 3, The Lord of the Rings: Golem.
Not him!
I am a huge Lord of the Rings fan. I've watched the movies, I collect the figurines, I've played all the games, and so far it has been an IP video game wise that has delivered a lot of favorable memories and moments for myself. Golem is definitely an interesting character within the Lord of the Rings. However, of all the interesting characters within the Lord of the Rings lore, would anyone want to play an entire game as Golem alone? Why would one trade the solid action of prior games that have been set up within this universe for busy work, uninspired and frustrating platforming and bad stealth? What is clear, however, is this is definitely not fun to play, and this is definitely not something that I would recommend to even the die-hardest of Lord of the Rings fans. I don't want to kill anyone's buzz or anyone's love for this franchise, but this is something that I think is best left deep within the minds of Moria. Fucking throw it down the fucking well with the Balrog, okay? Number 2, The Walking Dead, Destinies.
Blood's boiling.
I am an absolute fanboy when it comes to The Walking Dead, and this is a game that I didn't find out about until just before it was released. I'm actually quite surprised it went under the radar for so long. And the premise of Destinies is one that is so incredibly interesting. I'm a huge fan of video games that allow you to take the concept of being able to spin your own story as the game goes. You know, your choices matter. And within the Walking Dead universe, the idea of being able to make some changes that shift the Walking Dead's lore entirely excited myself as a fan. Answering questions like what might have happened if Rick had died instead of Shane and Shane went on to lead the group. What would have happened if T-Dog was left on the rooftop and Merle wasn't handcuffed to that rooftop. Unfortunately, premise is not enough to get this game over the line, and it is a boring, ugly mess that should be avoided at all costs. Horrendous graphics, weightless combat, repetitive mission design, and as many bugs as zombies reduces Destinies to the gaming equivalent of a biological hazard. I think the two biggest things out of this that a lot of people complained about was the design and voicing of the characters, some of which were done incredibly dirty, and the fact that cutscenes were almost non-existent and replaced with static imagery. With that being said, however, this is definitely an IP or a kind of gameplay mechanic style that I would like to see another game developer undertake. I think this game, from memory, was developed by a team of 3 people. I could be wrong, but it was an incredibly small team at that. I'm not making any excuses. This game was terrible. I've got it downloaded and I'm still thinking about playing it because, you know, as I said, I'm a Walking Dead fanboy. But I don't know whether I should put myself through that pain. You let me know. Number 1, The Day Before.
From now on, the doors of Woodbury will always be open to you.
I honestly don't think there could be any game list this year for the worst games of 2023 that does not have The Day Before in the number 1 slot. If they don't, they've gotten it wrong. The Day Before is easily one of the worst games that has ever been released, to the point where some people, as soon as they downloaded it, were already uninstalling it. Sure, you could say there are the bones of something coherent that could have been ran with, but even those bones feel splintered and brittle. The map is lifeless, the enemies are idiotic, its PvP is an exploitable mess, the story is pointless, and its progression is downright infuriating. There are some that have even gone as far as to say this is the biggest scam in gaming history. While the now defunct developer Fantastic said it wasn't done, certain baseline standards have been established in the years since early access became a thing, and this game met none of those standards. There are many mysterious questions left to be asked around the Days Before's development. However, those are going to go unanswered because not only is the game getting pulled from Steam, but the game developing studio itself has shut down for good. Steam is already diligently refunding anyone who made the mistake of buying it, and if you were lucky enough to not buy it, count yourself as one of the fucking lucky ones. Putting this list of 10 games aside, there is still plenty of other terrible games that released this year, so once again, do let me know in the comment section down below what your personal top 10 worst games of 2023 were. But it's not all doom and gloom, trust me. The next time we join each other, I'm going to be rattling off my top 10 best games of 2023. With a little proviso that it has to be games that I played, just to be a little bit fair. If you enjoyed this video, do leave a like on the video. Be sure to check out everything else that I've got going on the channel as well. But that's it from me, guys. I'm out of here, and as always, I will catch you guys next time. Hit subscribe, you bastard.